where they might be number one in the entire league might be their depth.
You are listening to KC Sports Network, the #1 podcast network for today's Kansas City sports fans. With former players from your favorite teams, informed perspectives, and former insiders, this is the place for you. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts or on our YouTube channel, all over social media, or our morning newsletter, KCSN Daily, dedicated to your Kansas City Chiefs. KC Sports Network is proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
Emergency 3-mile pod season is once again here as Kansas State has landed a huge commitment from a college basketball transfer in Keyontae Johnson, the former 2019-20 SEC preseason player of the year. I'm Cole Manbeck, joined as always by our co-host Derek Young of K-State Online. John Kurtz, unable to join us on this episode as John is on the West Coast enjoying a little bit of a vacation, but to his credit, he tried to make it work. But Kansas State, a huge commitment here that Kansas State's been waiting on for a couple months. They've recruited Keyontae Johnson heavily, and it's just big time for the Wildcats and what it means for the upcoming season for Kansas State. First, before we dive into that, we once again always want to thank our sponsor and our partner, Holiday Distillery. Whether it's been Holiday Bottled and Bond Bourbon or 360 Vodka, Kansas State fans, you'll be wanting to toast that over the weekend and many nights. Thanks to this Keyontae Johnson news. I'm sure the Kansas State basketball staff, if they drink, will be toasting some Ben Holiday Bottled and Bond Bourbon, or we recommend that they do because this commitment is huge to them, DY. What's the significance?
I mean, it's the top transfer that they've landed, assuming everything, checks out on the court in terms of his, medical prowess, which obviously this is a sign that he's going to be cleared or has been cleared by the Wildcats. So they clearly don't see any outstanding issues, and I think it makes them an NCAA tournament team at the end of the day, assuming that he is fully healthy. Before we dive too far into that, we got a word from another sponsor with DraftKings. Kansas DraftKings Sportsbook is coming to the Sunflower State. It won't be long until you can bet on all your favorite sports from the comfort of your own home. To celebrate, all new customers will receive $100 in free bets when you sign up using code KCSN. Plus, one lucky customer will win a $100,000 free bet. That's right, DraftKings Sportsbook is giving you $100 in free bets just for signing up today. No deposit required. Soon you'll be able to bet on money lines, spreads, props, and more with one of America's top-rated sportsbooks apps. DraftKings Sportsbook, plus you'll be entered in with a $100,000 free bet when you sign up. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and sign up with code KCSN to get $100 in free bets to use once mobile sports betting hits Kansas. Plus, one customer will win a $100,000 free bet. That's code KCSN only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Gambling problem? Getting help is your best bet. Call 800-522-4700, 21 and over. Physical present in Kansas. Eligibility restrictions apply. See terms at DraftKings.com/sportsbook. Subject to regulatory licensing requirements. One per customer. $100 issued as four $25 free bets. No purchase necessary for sweepstake. Void where prohibited. Ends first day. DraftKings is allowed to operate in Kansas. See terms at DKNG.com/Kansas. Cole, I know you're pretty excited about them coming to Kansas.
Oh, I am ecstatic that we're going to be able to legally bet now in the state of Kansas starting September 1st. The news came out, and whatever the over-under is on the futures for Kansas State basketball wins, guys, that's going to be shooting up. I'm going to be betting the over. If you can put a futures bet in on Kansas State to make the NCAA tournament, I'm taking that as well with the Keyontae Johnson news today, DY. I don't know if you're going to do the same, but I think this makes Kansas State a top 4 or 5 team in the Big 12, which makes you a tournament lock. And that's, I should caveat that by, and we'll talk more about Keyontae Johnson's health and everything, his medical history. We've talked about it some on the show before when talking about his recruitment. But, if he knocks most of that rust off and is anywhere close to what he's been at Florida, I think Kansas State's a top 4 or 5 team in the Big 12 and a lock for the NCAA tournament when you look at this roster.
It's hard to argue with that, and that is quite a statement, right? I mean, the Big 12 is freaking loaded. It still is. I mean, Iowa State's going to be pretty good, right? West Virginia has a chance to be solid. KU, I mean, you go down the line, and we haven't even talked about Texas Tech and Texas and Baylor. You got some national top 10 teams. Kansas State's going to have their work cut out for them. But here's what I can say about this Wildcat team now that they have their roster assembled, with the last piece of the puzzle put together with Keyontae Johnson. Where they might be number one in the entire league might be their depth. They're at 12 scholarship players now, right? I believe.
Right.
12.
Yep.
10 or 11 can play Big 12 basketball right now, and are, very qualified to be rotational players in the Big 12 and play significant minutes. Like, this is a deep team. They might be the deepest team in the Big 12 now that they have Keyontae Johnson. They're going to be playing, and this is not to compare the two eras, but I would say the biggest difference between this team and what we were accustomed seeing from, teams coached by Bruce Weber, of course, is that you're going to have guys that aren't in that starting five that can start for other teams in the Big 12.
And it's positionless basketball, right, DY? So they'll have the opportunity to be so versatile in what they do, because Keyontae Johnson can play the 2, the 3, the 4. Naquan Tomlin can play the 2, 3, or 4. I mean, I think they prefer him at the 3. Masood, Gassan. I mean, you look up and down the roster, they got a bunch of 6'5" and taller dudes that can play on the perimeter or go down in the post. I think they're very versatile. And to your point, I mean, I think they feel comfortable probably with 11 guys right now. I think Dorian Finister is the one guy they'd like to redshirt. They wanted to redshirt, I think, Taj Manning as well, an incoming freshman recruit that was actually signed by Bruce Weber, but they've acknowledged that they've been blown away and impressed by him. So I don't know if the plan would still be to redshirt him, but they certainly will have the opportunity, because they can go 10 deep, and usually coaches, they try to whittle down their rotations to 8 or 9 guys. So
that's going to be tough to do.
It is going to be tough to do. I mean, look, they may press. I think Tang has talked about pressing some. I mean, they'll be able to rotate in hockey line changes, right, and just go 5 and 5. I think they just have so much versatility now. But yeah, for people that haven't heard us talk about Keyontae Johnson, let's set the stage so you get an understanding of his recruitment, how good of a player he is. So Keyontae Johnson was all first team SEC his sophomore year at the University of Florida, averaged 14 points a game, 7 rebounds a game. He's 6'5", 230 pounds, was a top 70 recruit coming in out of high school, and has been terrific at Florida ever since he landed there. He's a career 52% shooter from the floor. So you think about that. I mean, that is insane, because he's not a guy that's just dunking the basketball like a post player that's just constantly down low, banging and layups and dunks. He's a guy that can shoot from the 3-point line. He's 38% from 3 in his career, over 70% from the foul line, 41.5-inch vertical leap when he arrived at Florida. And we talked about it earlier, 2020-21 SEC preseason player of the year. Now, that's where the unfortunate situation occurred. 5 games into the season, Keyontae was having a terrific year. I mean, just insane. He was shooting over 60% from the floor. And I think it was game 5 against Florida State when this very scary situation, he collapsed on the court, was taken to the hospital, and was later put in a medically induced coma. And what reports have said is that he was eventually diagnosed with acute myocarditis. I'm not a doctor, but that's inflammation of the heart muscle. That was about 2 years ago, a little less than 2 years ago. But Keyontae Johnson has not played in a competitive basketball game since. Now, there's obviously the medical situation, clearance, everything. Our understanding, reports are that Kansas State's team doctors have already cleared him. I'm sure there'll be more examinations, but I'm sure that was a concern for some of the teams recruiting him, DY. And that's why I have the caveat, if he can get back to himself, because it has been a long time since he has played in the game. But I think he's been working out and he's been practicing and in the gym. So hopefully all is okay on that front.
Yeah, I guess you worry. Maybe worry is not the right word, but things you'll have to attack once he gets to campus and starts working out with the team and is involved regularly with practices, is like you alluded to, you're going to be knocking some of that rust off, right? Just being an intense battle of competition. Everything's a little faster. In the games are a little bit faster in practices, but those live practices are probably a little bit faster than anything that he's been accustomed to even in his probably build up to, working out and stuff of that nature. So knocking off that kind of rust, from a skill perspective, once you really dive back into these things, I don't sense that he'll have a deficit in that department. I don't think you just lose everything that you had built up. Like I said, there's rust to knock off. There's probably some conditioning to kind of ascend and climb back into, and there's a difference between working out shape and playing shape.
Yep.
I think we're well aware of that. So he'll have to get back to that point. But from a skill perspective, I'm not really concerned about any deficits there. The deficit would be in the conditioning and to slowly working your way back into it, which I imagine there will be a bit of a, learning curve, growing pains. Those are probably not, the perfect phrase that I'm looking for, but there's going to be some probably kinks that he works out through the first part of non-conference play, I would imagine.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think what he provides for the Wildcats, where they're probably not elite at or needed a little reinforcement or supplement, was shooting ability, really. I mean, this team can really defend. It can really rebound. He's going to add to that as well. I would not be shocked if they are the number one rebounding team in the Big 12 with some of the numbers and of some of these players that they're kind of assembling and putting around each other. That's going to be an area where they are, very, very good at. But shooting was like the one thing where they probably weren't as crisp. But when you look at everyone's past and kind of what their, top traits are, Desi Sills, you would hope, can help in that area. He had only one great year, but it was a really good year shooting the basketball. I think this past one. So, there's those things to work out, but I think Keyontae Johnson, what he will help them the most is probably being a playmaker on the offensive end, but more than anything, gives them another shooter on the floor.
Yep. Yeah, I would echo all of that. I mean, he's a guy, again, 38% from three. And I can't emphasize enough how insane it is for a guy that plays on the perimeter and does go down low some, but plays mostly on the perimeter to shoot 52% in his career from the floor. I mean, he's been above 50%. I think he was 54, 55% dating back from his sophomore year to present. I mean, that's nuts. His effective field goal percentage, 59%. He started 55 games at Florida, was a team captain, kind of player coach, and he has 6'11" wingspan. So you talk about the rebounding, DY. I'm glad you hit on that, because it is nuts to think about how Kansas State went from a team that could not rebound the ball worth a lick last year. Let's just be honest. I mean, they were probably the worst rebounding team in the Big 12. To now you look at the size and length and rebounding capabilities of the guys that they put on this roster. And it's insane. I mean, they've got guys that are on the perimeter guards like Tyke Green, Stony Brook transfer, who's a good rebounder. Keyontae Johnson at 6'5", a terrific rebounder. Keyontae is average in his career almost 7 rebounds per game. That's truly insane. And a guy that can really finish at the rim. If you go up and down the height of this roster, I mean, Marquise Noel is 5'8", but then you look at it, you got Cam Carter at 6'3" with incredible length. You got Taj Manning, Naquan Tomlin, Masood, all 6'8", Gasson, 6'8", Bebe, 6'10", Gerald Colbert, 6'9", 6'10-ish. I mean, Desi Sills, 6'2". I mean, but good length. I mean, they have so much length. They're going to get out and guard you and rebound. And that's the other thing we didn't touch on yet, DY, but this is a guy whose defensive rating was around 94, 95 throughout much of his career. Anything below 100 is good. He's a really good defensive player. He actually led Florida in steals his sophomore year with 38. You're pairing him with a guy like Desi Sills, who also has a really good steal percentage. Marquise Noel's a ball hawk. So these guys are going to get after it on the defensive end of the floor as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's when we spoke to Jerome Tang at a recent press conference just before he left for vacation in Cabo, and he gets back from Cabo and he lands Keyontae Johnson. So, and before he went to Cabo, he landed RJ Jones. So he's had a good few weeks. He's killing it at this point. But I know when we spoke to him, he wasn't going to promise any certain amount of wins, and he wasn't going to promise any certain style of basketball on the offensive end of the floor. Probably still working through a bit of those things, especially since Rodney Perry was just announced. And I think that he's going to have some influence on that end of the floor, on that side of the ball. But he said the promises were they're going to be fun to watch. they're gonna guard people, which you look at the roster, what they've assembled, that looks to be completely accurate, and we're going to rebound the basketball. I mean, he said those things, but he didn't have to say those things when you look at the roster and see what this team is about. It's a defensive and rebounding. And even Rodney Perry in his introductory Zoom press conference, when we spoke to him, he said, we're going to hang our hat on the defensive end of the floor. They certainly are. They have assembled a roster that, it revolves around that. But it is good to see some of these later transfers. I think you can count Desi Sills, Tyke Green, and Keyontae Johnson a part of that, being guys that definitely have some chops on the offensive end of the floor, because there was a point and people were panicking. We tried to pump the brakes on the panic button that people wanted to press, back in May or June, because we're like, where's the offense? Where's the offense? And even at one point I was like, wondering where that offensive output was going to come from. The last few transfers really take care of that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Jerome Tang came on our 3-mile pod in April, and he mentioned they may wait into August to land a guy still. And
almost September. Yeah.
And we're recording this on August 20th, and Kansas State basketball is adding the former SEC preseason player of the year to the roster. They've really exercised.
Class starts Monday.
Yeah, classes start Monday, and Desi Sills just arrived as well. I mean, look, that is one challenge, is that Keyontae and Desi Sills, they had 10 guys that have been involved in the workouts when Tyke Green joined them on the Stony Brook transfer. But, Keyontae and Desi are going to have to be mixed in. And like you said, get into shape. Now, the season doesn't start till November. They're going to get these guys into shape. They've got time. You would have ideally loved to have everybody together throughout the summer, but that just wasn't feasible. And really, Keyontae's recruitment didn't really open up until the last couple months when he started making visits. He visited Western Kentucky, we believe, and then visited K-State the last weekend of July. And just to talk about his actual recruitment a little bit more, we thought Kansas State sat in a great position when he made the visit the last weekend of July to Manhattan. Looked like he had a great time. But then word started to leak out that Western Kentucky was a bigger threat than we maybe thought and perceived. And it makes sense. Rick Stansberry is notorious for being able to land some top dudes. And you looked at Keyontae's social media footprint of who he was following. It was a lot of K-State folks and then several Western Kentucky players as well from that team. USC was a team rumored to be in on him, but he never took a visit there from what we've seen. And they kind of just died out, fizzled out of the mix. But then this week, out of nowhere, and DY, I think you had alluded that Memphis was getting into the mix, right?
I heard Memphis. I also heard Marquette and Wake Forest. Those two never came to fruition, or at least they didn't move the needle for him. Yeah.
Well, so Keyontae, it was the Friday before, so about 8 days ago from when we're recording this, that he put on his Instagram him in a Western Kentucky jersey and him in a K-State jersey, and we all thought he's naming his final two. Okay, Marquette and Wake Forest that you'd heard about are now out of the mix. It's going to be Kansas State, Western Kentucky. We know Western Kentucky's strong on the name, image, and likeness front. That was the biggest concern there. But then you start to hear Memphis. You were the first one to report it. I mean, you reported it before any national or Memphis guys. You mentioned it on the boards and kstateonline.com, and I never saw anyone mention it before you. And you have to worry about Penny Hardaway on the recruiting trail, and he puts dudes in the NBA as well. I mean, there's other reasons you have to worry about him too. And Memphis,
Fred Hoiberg and Nebraska got in. I know you're going to touch on that. Fred Hoiberg, as bad as a tournament past, like literally 0 tournament wins for that program in Nebraska. But Fred Hoiberg, he can sell that. He puts dudes in the NBA too.
Oh, he puts dudes in the NBA. He played in the NBA. He's been great at landing transfers really before he got to Nebraska. So I'm sure he was selling, the impact he's had on transfers as well. But that visit came out of nowhere. I mean, we see a tweet from On3 on Wednesday of this week that he's visiting Nebraska on August 17th. Well, that was that day. So he was on the campus, visited. Then we saw an On3 report from a Nebraska site that last night that came out that he wasn't going to choose Nebraska, that they'd been eliminated. He'd canceled his, I guess he had a Memphis visit scheduled. We never saw confirmed reports of that.
Must have been for this weekend, yeah.
Yeah, and so, and now here we sit. What a whirlwind of a recruitment. It's just crazy because Keyontae has been so quiet on social media. Like the only way you've been able to track it, he hasn't spoke to any reporters. You just had to track it by tracking his Instagram follows to see really what concerns there were. And, I was doing a lot of that.
And credit to this guy and Jeff Goodman. He broke a lot of Keyontae's recruitment as well.
Yeah, he did. Jeff Goodman actually had the news first this morning, which put me on cloud 9. I've been waiting. I've been on Keyontae watch, as you well know from the group text. I think I probably sent you guys 1,000 texts on Keyontae over the last couple months with his Instagram follower alerts, etc. But he continued to follow Kansas State folks on Instagram over the last week, which gave you some quiet confidence that maybe he was going to eventually choose the Cats. One other thing I want to touch on before we wrap this up, DY. So when you talk about Fred Hoiberg obviously has a heart issue as well. And I don't know if that was part of the discussion, but he's got a pacemaker and has to have procedures done every few years on that. Jerome Tang, Jeff Goodman actually had pointed this out back when Keyontae Johnson was visiting earlier this year at Kansas State, that Jerome Tang coached 2 players at Baylor that both had heart conditions, which was King McClure and Jared Butler. So, maybe that played a factor as well. I don't know, but I think Jerome Tang feels confident. Now, all situations are different, but I think, he feels confident taking on a player like Keyontae, and hopefully everything clears out, checks out medically. And if so, Kansas State's got a heck of a guy. And DY, if you had to choose, assuming Keyontae Johnson is close to what he was at Florida, and you compare him to the Antoine Davis recruitment from Detroit a few months ago, and obviously Kansas State staff went heavy on Antoine Davis, who would you rather have, Antoine Davis or Keyontae?
Probably Keyontae is just a little bit more of an all-around player, seasoned in a high major league. And obviously, like you put the add on there that he's close to, or is what he was before, but I think you would take Keyontae in that scenario. I'll throw it back to you. I know you probably agree with that. Can you imagine if they gotten both?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you'd have trouble finding enough spots for the ball to go around at that point. But yeah, that would have been insane. I hands down take Keyontae Johnson. If I just think he's the much more complete player. I think Antoine Davis is more of just a scorer, but you're talking about Keyontae, a guy that's a great defensive player, a good rebounder, and a good scorer, and can play the 2 through 4. The versatility that he brings to the fold, I think that's just so much different than Antoine Davis. And look, I would have taken Antoine Davis too. I mean, I was begging him on Twitter to choose Kansas State, but I honestly think, this is a pretty strong statement coming from me, I think Keyontae Johnson, if he didn't have the medical issue and had entered the transfer portal coming out of Florida this last year, I think he would have been the number 1 or number 2 transfer in the entire portal. I mean, he's that good. So I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that, DY, but I think Kansas State's a tournament team now and cannot wait to get into Bramlage and watch these guys play.
I would agree. I mean, they're certainly a tournament team. They've put themselves into that conversation by the work that they've completed in the offseason. I think one last thing before we run out of here too, just a quick shout out to Charlie Hustle and the shirts they got us and their new collection. It's coming out as well, or has come out. I think it came out over the weekend. It sounds like the Deuces Loose shirts are already sold out. Yeah,
they're doing well. And I will acknowledge that my birthday is in early September, and I sent some links to my wife of the new Charlie Hustle collection at Kansas State to have purchased for my birthday. My wife did respond that I need to have a more adult-like closet with less K-State stuff, but I was able to convince her. I work from home for a living, so I can wear as much K-State gear as I want. So yeah, we thank Charlie Hustle. Go to charliehustle.com. Check out their new K-State line, which launched yesterday. I think it was 25 new pieces of apparel on the Charlie Hustle website, or you can go to their downtown store on the plaza and check them out as well, which I have done. So look, another emergency 3-mile pod in the books. Kansas State, we'll hope to have some more people on to talk about the basketball team over the coming months, the coming weeks, talk about the Keyontae Johnson edition as well. We'll try to line up a couple guests to give you guys some expert opinions, so you don't just have to hear us talk. But we were so excited about this news that we felt like it was significant enough to get it out on a Saturday for you, get this thing recorded and get this thing launched, because this is huge news for the Kansas State basketball roster. And like I said, I think Kansas State now is a top 4 or 5 team in the Big 12, and book it for the NCAA tournament, folks. So, all right. Well, we'll put a wrap on this. Always appreciate Derek Young at K-State Online for jumping on with us. Appreciate you, our listeners. Remember, like, subscribe to our podcast. Feel free to rate it on Apple Podcasts and give us whatever star evaluation and ranking. Give us your feedback. We appreciate that, and that helps us with our content moving forward. We appreciate any feedback you have. Appreciate you listening. We appreciate our sponsors, Holiday Distillery, 360 Vodka. Have a toast of some 360 Vodka tonight on Saturday night, or some Ben Holiday bottled in bond bourbon to celebrate the Keyontae Johnson news and Kansas State's basketball roster that Jerome Tang and staff have put together. That'll do it for another 3 Mile Pod. Again, we appreciate your support. For Derek Young, I'm Cole Manbeck. Thanks as always for listening.